So when we think about getting on a plane today, it's pretty routine, isn't it? Security lines, cramped seats. It almost feels like public transport.
Yeah, definitely. Like you go through security, you find your seat. It's almost like getting on a bus, you know?
But imagine a time when flying was seen as this incredible feat, pushing the very limits of possibility. And if you wanted an airline that truly captured that groundbreaking spirit, that sense of American ambition reaching for the skies, the name Pan American World Airways, Pan Am, would absolutely dominate the conversation.
It wasn't just getting from point A to point B. Pan Am cultivated this aura, becoming a powerful symbol of 20th century American global influence. It's amazing, even in science fiction, like in 2001, A Space Odyssey, Pan Am was the go-to for commercial space travel.
Right. That really tells you something about their iconic status back then.
Absolutely. But that once mighty brand is gone. So our mission in this deep dive is to uncover how Pan Am achieved such incredible heights, and ultimately what led to its dramatic fall.
Okay, so let's get into the foundation of this story. It starts surprisingly early, 1927. Pan American Airways was actually founded by officers from the U.S. Army Air Corps.
Military origins.
Yeah, their primary concern was the growing influence of a German-backed airline in Central America. Pan Am's initial operation was, well, pretty modest. Just a mail run between Key West, Florida, and Havana, Cuba.
A mail run. And right around this time, a fascinating figure emerges, Juan Trippe. He was a young, incredibly driven businessman with deep roots in American society. His vision wasn't just mail.
No, he envisioned an airline that would redefine luxury travel, specifically targeting a wealthy clientele. Of course, a vision of that scale requires significant capital.
Exactly, and Trippe had a significant advantage. His connections from Yale, we're talking about classmates with names like Vanderbilt, Rockefeller, and Harriman titans of American industry and finance.
Wow, some heavy hitters.
Definitely. They invested a substantial $250,000 in Trippe's venture, and in the summer of 1927, he established the Aviation Corporation of America. Shortly thereafter, that initial mail flight between Key West and Havana took place without a hitch.
Okay, so the mail run is successful. What's next?
A truly pivotal piece of legislation then came into play in 1928, the Foreign Air Mail Act. This act was crucial because it essentially granted exclusive and highly profitable mail delivery contracts, particularly in Latin America.
Government contracts, always key.
But only to U.S. airlines that were specifically invited by the local governments. This is where Juan Trippe's diplomatic talents really came to the forefront.
Right, he wasn't just a businessman.
Not at all. He embarked on this whirlwind tour across Latin America, engaging with local leaders and forging crucial relationships. You can imagine his persuasive abilities were quite something.
And then he made an incredibly strategic move. He brought on Charles Lindbergh as a technical consultant.
Lindbergh. Fresh off his solo transatlantic flight, Lindbergh was arguably the most famous person on the planet. His involvement instantly opened doors and lent immense credibility to Pan Am.
That's a masterstroke. Instant fame and technical expertise.
Precisely. And it was in that same year, 1928, that the original Pan American merged with Trippe's Aviation Corporation. It was a synergistic combination.
So how did that work? What did each side bring?
Well, the original Pan American brought its established name and those vital government connections, which were instrumental in securing routes throughout the Caribbean and Latin America, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Mexico, Chile, and many others.
Okay, the roots in the name recognition.
And what did Trippe contribute? His forward-thinking vision, his strong management, and that relentless drive to expand. He saw the bigger picture.
Got it. And by 1929, they were ready to launch their very first international passenger service. The route connected Miami to San Juan, Puerto Rico, with stops throughout Central America. Now get this.
How long did that take?
That roughly 2,000-mile journey took an astonishing 56 hours.
56 hours?
Yeah, that included 2 overnight stops. It really highlights just how challenging, and indeed pioneering, those early days of commercial air travel were.
It's striking, isn't it? The rapid evolution we see in these early years. Moving from simply transporting mail to conceiving of luxurious passenger travel spanning continents, it was a time fueled by remarkable ambition and constant innovation.
Okay, so we've covered the initial spark, the groundwork, and Trippe's vision solidifying. But it was really the 1930s where Pan Am truly ascended, right, into this golden age.
You're absolutely right. The 1930s were a period of exponential growth and groundbreaking innovation for Pan Am. They essentially wrote the playbook for long-haul international air travel.
Especially with their pioneering use of those massive flying boats, the hydroplanes, for these incredibly long distances. Pan Am was the first to establish regular commercial service across the vast Pacific Ocean.
And to initiate scheduled flights across the North Atlantic. Huge undertakings. And a pivotal figure in this technological leap was the brilliant aircraft designer Igor Sikorsky.
Sikorsky.
Right.
What was his contribution?
Sikorsky designed these truly remarkable flying boats specifically tailored for Pan Am's ambitious routes. His S-40 and S-42 were revolutionary four-engine aircraft. Huge machines for their time.
And what's fascinating is the symbolic christening of the first S-40 as the American Clipper. It evoked the romance and speed of the 19th century sailing ships.
Exactly. That wasn't just a name. It marked the beginning of a tradition. Every Pan Am aircraft from then on would bear the Clipper moniker. It built this whole brand identity.
Then in 1936, Pan Am inaugurated passenger service all the way across the Pacific. Now this was far from your average accessible flight. A round-trip ticket from San Francisco to Manila cost around $1,400 back then.
$1,400 in 1936. To really put that in perspective for you, that's the equivalent of tens of thousands of dollars in today's money.
Wow. So this was an experience exclusively for the very wealthy.
Absolutely. And the mystique surrounding Pan Am's flying boat fleet was so powerful that Hollywood even produced a film called China Clipper, starring Humphrey Bogart, further cementing their legendary status.
They were celebrities in their own right, these planes.
You could say that. And by 1939, you could actually fly Pan Am all the way to Hong Kong. That was a 6-day journey.
6 days. Still incredibly long by today's standard.
Oh, for sure. These extended routes were made possible by new, longer-range Boeing flying boats, the first of which was christened the Honolulu Clipper.
And it truly underscores Pan Am's global significance when, in 1943, President Franklin D. Roosevelt himself flew aboard a Pan Am Boeing Clipper to the Casablanca Conference.
Meeting with Churchill and de Gaulle, right?
Exactly. It was the first time a sitting U.S. president had ever flown abroad, and he even celebrated his birthday during the return journey. That's a testament to their reliability and prestige.
A huge vote of confidence. But after World War II, the landscape began to shift. Pan Am lost the government-backed monopoly it had enjoyed on many of its international routes.
Right. The war changed everything. Suddenly, competition entered the picture. And while long-haul flights remained a premium experience, Juan Trippe recognized the need to broaden their appeal.
And his response demonstrated real foresight. Drawing inspiration from ocean liners, he decided to introduce different service classes within the aircraft cabin. Think about it, just like on a ship.
Makes sense. Stratify the market.
And in 1948, Pan Am made history as the first international airline to offer an economy class. This meant more closely spaced seating and fewer complimentary amenities, but the crucial result was significantly lower fares.
So this democratized international air travel, making it a possibility for a much wider segment of the population.
Exactly. A huge shift. But it's important to note that the allure of luxury wasn't abandoned. For those who could afford it, first class on Pan Am remained the epitome of opulence.
Like what? What kind of luxury are we talking?
We're talking about actual beds being prepared for passengers and stewardesses serving breakfast in bed. Real high-end service.
Breakfast in bed on a plane.
Pan Am continued to flourish and solidified its image as an incredible symbol of American progress in the post-war world. And that image was physically embodied in the 1960s with the construction of their stunning, futuristic Worldport terminal at New York's JFK Airport, that iconic flying saucer shape.
Oh yeah, the Worldport, instantly recognizable.
And in Manhattan, they built the massive Pan Am building, a towering presence above Grand Central Terminal. Even today, it remains one of the tallest buildings in the U.S.
Huge building. Didn't Le Corbusier have something to do with that?
Interestingly, its design incorporated elements from an unrealized concept by the renowned architect Le Corbusier, and its facade featured these enormous Pan Am letters. It speaks volumes about their brand strength.
How so?
Well, when the building was later sold, the estimated cost to remove those massive letters was around $3 million. So the new owner decided to keep the iconic logo in place for another decade.
$3 million just to take the letters down?
Yeah.
That really underscores Pan Am's dominant presence. They weren't just a successful company, they made sure their success was visible.
Absolutely. And they were undeniably a technological leader, largely due to Juan Trippe's remarkable vision. They were the first airline to fully embrace the potential of long-range aircraft.
Like which ones?
Well, they became the launch customer for the Boeing 377 Stratocruiser, which was the largest, fastest, and most luxurious airliner of its time. A real status symbol.
And when the jet age dawned in the 1950s,
Pan Am was right there at the forefront.
in 1958, their Boeing 707, the Clipper America, operated the very first scheduled transatlantic passenger flight by an American jetliner. Big milestone.
The beginning of the jet set era.
Pretty much. And then in 1961, they forged a partnership with IBM to develop PANAMAC, a revolutionary computerized reservation system. The technology was so cutting edge.
How cutting edge.
It was on par with what the Pentagon was using at the time for reservations.
Wow. IBM and Pan Am. That's serious tech for the early 60s.
It really was. And it was Trippe's audacious thinking again that led to the creation of what is arguably the most iconic airliner ever, the Boeing 747.
The jumbo jet. The jumbo. Pan Am placed an order for a staggering 100 of these jets before they had even taken their first flight.
100. That's an incredible gamble.
Huge gamble, but it paid off. And with these 747s, Pan Am set new round-the-world speed records and expanded its service to destinations like Japan and Australia. By the late 70s, they were flying to every continent except Antarctica.
Truly a global airline.
Another fascinating and unique aspect of Pan Am's history was their service to the Soviet Union.
Flying to Moscow during the Cold War.
Yeah. Trippe had actually initiated discussions way back in the 1930s, but geopolitical tensions understandably put those plans on hold. The talks resumed in the late 50s, and finally, on July 15, 1968, a Pan Am Boeing 707 touched down in Moscow, marking the very first direct U.S.-Soviet airlink.
That's incredible. A huge diplomatic and logistical achievement.
Definitely, especially given the backdrop of the Cold War. Aeroflot, the Soviet airline, operated the reciprocal route.
Interesting. So how long did that last?
It's interesting to note that Pan Am remained the sole U.S. airline with direct flights to the USSR until that service was suspended following the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979.
Politics intervened again.
And there was a notable contrast in the operations. Aeroflot tickets were more affordable due to subsidies, often resulting in fully booked flights, whereas Pan Am's flights on that same route frequently had empty seats.
Different economic models at play.
Completely. Now, shifting gears a bit, Pan Am's marketing was truly masterful. Their Blue Globe logo, introduced in the 1950s, remains one of the most globally recognized corporate symbols.
Glue meatball, yeah.
Iconic. Their advertisements beautifully captured the allure and thrill of air travel, and their famous slogan, "World's Most Experienced Airline," was reportedly suggested by the legendary Ernest Hemingway, a frequent flyer himself.
Hemingway came up with that. Wow.
So the story goes, and those branded Pan Am flight bags, they became highly sought-after status symbols, seen carried by everyone from presidents to movie stars.
Oh yeah, everyone wanted one of those bags.
And who could forget? February 7th, 1964. Pan Am Flight 101 from London brought the Beatles to America for the very first time, igniting the British invasion.
The Beatles' arrival, that image is burned into history.
Pan Am exclusively handled their arrival, and those images of the Fab Four waving with the Pan Am logo prominently displayed became instantly iconic. Talk about a marketing triumph. Pure gold.
You couldn't buy that kind of publicity.
Nope. They were also incredibly effective at product placement in films. You saw Pan Am featured in everything from 2001: A Space Odyssey
This Grace Plane.
to James Bond films, Indiana Jones Adventures, even Blade Runner and Scarface. They were everywhere in pop culture.
So by the 1970s, as we've discussed, Pan Am had transcended being just an airline. It had become a genuine global cultural force, the undisputed leader in its industry. It truly seemed like an unassailable empire.
Yeah, just absolutely dominant, seemingly untouchable.
Hearing about all that unprecedented success and innovation, it's almost unbelievable that the story concludes the way it does. How could such a seemingly invincible force simply vanish?
That is the fundamental question, isn't it? And despite their apparent dominance, a confluence of unfortunate circumstances ultimately led to their downfall, a real perfect storm.
A perfect storm. Okay, what were the elements?
Well, the first major shockwave was the 1973 oil crisis. This wasn't just about higher fuel bills, though that was bad enough. It exposed Pan Am's operational inefficiencies and its significant reliance on those large, less fuel-efficient Boeing 747s.
The jumbos that had been their big advantage.
Exactly. A strategic choice that, in retrospect, proved to be a misstep compared to airlines that were investing in smaller, more adaptable fleets. Their operating costs soared virtually overnight.
Okay, so rising costs were the first hit.
Then came a seismic shift in the regulatory landscape. The Airline Deregulation Act of 1978. This fundamentally altered the industry's dynamics.
How did deregulation hurt Pan Am specifically?
It dismantled government protection of routes and fares. Suddenly, Pan Am lost those lucrative exclusive rights it held on numerous international routes and found itself facing intense new competition, often from airlines with much leaner operations and lower cost structures.
So more competition, lower fares.
And because Pan Am had never cultivated a strong domestic network to feed into its international flights, its revenues began to be severely squeezed. They didn't have those profitable domestic routes to fall back on.
Right, they were all international, basically.
Pretty much. And as this immense financial pressure mounted, it became increasingly clear that Pan Am was burdened by the legacy of its extensive empire building. They were operating unprofitable routes, managing an aging fleet of aircraft, maintaining numerous expensive real estate holdings across the globe.
Like the Pan Am building.
Exactly, and carrying substantial general overhead costs. By the late 1970s, they were incurring losses in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Hundreds of millions. That's unsustainable.
Totally. Then, in 1981, they lost Juan Trippe, the visionary leader who had guided the airline for over 4 decades. His successors faced an increasingly intricate and challenging industry, and they struggled to replicate his strategic brilliance.
The loss of the visionary founder. That's often a turning point.
It certainly didn't help. And then came the truly devastating blow to the airline's reputation and to public trust in flying with them. The bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland in December 1988.
Lockerbie. Such a tragedy.
Horrific. Libyan terrorists were responsible for the destruction of that Boeing 747, and tragically, all 259 people on board and 11 on the ground perished. Even though Pan Am was not directly responsible for the act of terrorism itself, that horrific event became indelibly linked to the airline's name.
Yeah, people were scared to fly Pan Am after that.
Understandably so. It instilled significant fear among potential passengers. The brand damage was immense.
And if all of that wasn't enough,
the final crippling blow came with Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990 and the subsequent Persian Gulf War. Fuel prices spiked dramatically once again.
another oil shock.
And perhaps even more significantly, the widespread global uncertainty and fear led to a sharp and prolonged downturn in international air travel. Routes that had previously been profitable, including Pan Am's crucial transatlantic services, suddenly began hemorrhaging money.
So, high costs, low demand, the final straw.
Pretty much. Consequently, in January of 1991, Pan American World Airways filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Despite various efforts to restructure and find a viable path forward, the airline simply couldn't recover.
So the end was near.
And on December 4th, 1991, Pan Am Flight 436 arrived in Miami from Barbados. That marked the airline's final scheduled flight.
The final landing.
And as you mentioned earlier, there's a poignant symmetry in the fact that it ended in the same Caribbean region where the Pan Am story had begun 64 years prior, back to where it all started.
Wow. At the Miami airport, the arriving Clipper was met with a traditional water cannon salute from the fire trucks. And what was truly remarkable was the hundreds of current and former Pan Am employees who gathered to witness the end. Many were visibly emotional, openly weeping. It genuinely signified the end of a significant era.
A very emotional scene, I imagine. And with its demise, as many have observed, went the end of that truly romantic era of passenger aviation, the era of the Clippers, of that unparalleled luxury and service, and that boundless optimism that once defined the possibilities of air travel.
The story of Pan Am really stands as a powerful case study, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It illustrates how external shocks, like oil crises, fundamental shifts in regulation, internal vulnerabilities within a company, and even unforeseen tragic events can converge to bring down even the most seemingly invincible corporate empires.
Absolutely. It truly underscores the critical importance of adaptability and long-term strategic thinking in any industry. You can't rest on your laurels.
So we've taken a comprehensive deep dive into the extraordinary journey of Pan Am, from its humble beginnings as a mail service to its ascent as a global icon.
Yeah.
And we've examined the intricate web of factors that ultimately led to its dramatic decline.
It's a story with so many facets: innovation, ambition, glamour, but also missteps and tragedy.
And that leads us to a final thought for you, our listeners, to consider. Looking beyond all the contributing factors we've discussed, the oil crises, deregulation, the tragedy of Lockerbie, what single strategic decision or pivotal event, if handled differently, do you think might have altered the ultimate fate of Pan Am?
That's a great question. Maybe if they'd developed a domestic network earlier. Or perhaps handled the 747 fleet differently.
It's a fascinating question to contemplate, and perhaps it might even inspire you to delve further into this captivating story on your own.